let's talk about funerals for a second. Oh my God, is he doing a cold open? He's doing a cold open. So, like, funerals are dumb. They're just so dumb. All right. The whole concept, funerals and cemeteries are dumb. All right. Because, like, they're all sad. I've never been to a funeral or seen or heard of a funeral where everyone was, like, happy. All right. Like, it's always sad. Like, even Hitler's funeral, even though, like, a lot of people were probably really happy that he was dead, it was still sad because you still have all of the sadness that he created all around him. Right. And yeah, like, that you can paint it however you want. Like, oh, it's a celebration of life. It's sad. It's sad because guess what? They ain't there no more. Like, you literally don't have you're never going to have them in your life again. It's real sad. And it doesn't matter how good of a time you had with them. You are sad because it's never coming back. Like, your life is irreparably different from that point forward. And it's sad. It is so sad. And then you couple that, we're going to get real deep here. You couple that with this still foreboding sense of the unknown as to, will I ever see them again? Maybe not. And like, you can lean on religion all you want, you know, but that's still faith. Faith is the absence of hard evidence. And you still don't know. You would love to think that we'll all see our grandparents again. We don't know. We don't know. And that unknown also makes it really sad because deep down inside, we know that there's the chance, even if you think it's small, we know there's a chance that we'll never experience life or existence with that person ever again. And so we as a society have now created this industry around death, and you know, cultures everywhere celebrate death. And so this is another area where I don't understand. I don't understand, like, why we have to respect the dead. Like, why? I mean, get it. Like, we're going to get weird for a second. Let's take necrophilia, for example. Outside of it being disgusting, just weird, gross behavior, I think one reason why, people get real freaked out about that is because it's disrespecting the dead person's body. They ain't in it no more. Like, it's just a sack of flesh at that point. Like, a dead body is no different than just like couch cushions or the refrigerator door or whatever. Like, it's just a thing to stick your wiener into. But, like, I'm not saying I would ever do it. It's gross. All right. Like, dead bodies, I think people just, like, involuntary poop themselves after they die. It's disgusting. Like, I'm not into that. I can't emphasize enough how not into that you get it. Anyway. So, like, but we have, like, this weird thing about, you can't exhume the grave of somebody. It's just bones. Like, I loved my grandparents dearly. But, like, if someone told me, yes, some vandals broke into the cemetery and dug up Granny and Pa's bodies, okay. Like, fine, whatever. Like, that doesn't bother me. It's not like they were in there and they were like, oh, no, what are you doing? No. Like, they're not there. They gone, dog. And so, like, that doesn't make sense to me. But people get all weird about it. People get super weird about, we must respect the bodies. And I'm taking that literally because it's like, and sure, maybe it's what it represents. But, I think the memories and, like, photographs represent that person's spirit much more than the decaying flesh and bone that has been buried underground and then flooded with groundwater for however long they've been down there. I don't know. But that's what we're talking about today. So here we go. Podcast. Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson. Today, if you couldn't tell, we're talking about dead people, and specifically people who disrespected the dead in some way. This is going to be a very morbid episode, and honestly, I thought I was going to have a hard time with that cold open, and I kind of did. I started thinking about my dead grandparents, started getting a little sad. And, but then I kind of went down that path of, so let them get exhumed. I don't care. It's not them. It's just a pile of bones. And sure, that my grandpa's casket has a picture of me on it, which is weird, but it's fine. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but it's fine. It's fine. And so we got 4 stories today of some people and some businesses who kind of probably had the same outlook on it as I did, but actually went through with it. I would never mess with that because I understand how it can affect somebody because I'm not a dick, but these people did not care. And so we're looking at the stories of Anatoly Moskvin, the Tri-State Crematory, David Sconce, and our first story will be of Congress Park. Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time. In 1858, Denver, Colorado opened the Prospect Hill Cemetery, and for more than a decade, the people of Denver used this cemetery as a pleasant final resting place for their loved ones who probably died of dysentery or cholera or whatever diseases they had out in the Wild West back then. However, in 1872, the U.S. government claimed the cemetery was on federally owned land that had been deeded to the government back in 1860 by a treaty with the Arapaho tribe. Probably, the city of Denver purchased the land back from the government for $200 and then opened the cemetery up as a burial place for all religions and groups, such as the Oddfellows, the Masons, and the Jews. I don't know why I said it like that. That's just that old Louis C.K. bit where he's just saying anything in a specific tone can sound like a slur. So it's like Jews. That's what they are. But then Jews. Anyway, you get it. So for whatever reason, though, the Chinese section of the cemetery was in a separate section on the south end of the land. Why? For whatever reason could it be? Other than the fact that this country has been low-key super racist to the Chinese for a long time. All the Chinese people that came over and built the railroads and were then subsequently kind of murdered as they worked or just died and tossed somewhere into the mountains that they were dynamiting out. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I was also going to say the World War II internment camps, but those were Japanese, and that's on me for lumping them all in the same. They're both Asians. That's where it was going. Anyway, I should keep going. By the 1880s, the cemetery had been grossly neglected and became an eyesore in a part of Denver that was quickly becoming the very ritzy, high-end, wealthy part of town. In 1890, Colorado Senator Henry Moore Teller convinced Congress to turn the cemetery into a city park. And so on January 25th, the city vacated the cemetery and the land was renamed to Congress Park. I think it was 1893. So when this happened. So families, after the cemetery is now renamed into a nice city park, families were given 90 days to move the bodies that were buried there to another cemetery. But the city ultimately waited more than 2 years for the bodies to be removed. After that 2 years was up, the city contracted E.P. McGovern to remove the unclaimed remains in 1893. So this was actually back in 1890, 1891 when the park was named. Not that it matters. Under the terms of this contract, McGovern was instructed to provide a new coffin for each grave that he exhumed and then transfer everything to another cemetery in the city with a payment of $1.90 for each transfer. McGovern, however, he's a smart man, all right? He's thinking like your boy over here, and he quickly realized that, like, no one actually cared about these graves. If after 2 years, no one came forward to do anything about the graves that were left over, and I don't know how many got transferred out to begin with, but it was probably not very many. And so McGovern's like, look, no one cares about these bodies. Why should I? And so he decided to maximize his profits in any way that he possibly could. Rather than using adult-sized coffins, McGovern brought in child-sized coffins for everyone. And look, this is the late 1890s. You can get a child-sized coffin probably easier than an adult-sized coffin. Mortality rates back then, especially out west, not great. All right, they probably got them on hand, plenty in stock. And so he goes and buys child-sized coffins for everyone. And the few that were too big to fit in the 3.5 foot long, 1 foot wide coffin were then chopped up and stuffed inside. Some people were also spread out among as many as 3 coffins. On March 19th, the Denver Republican then ran a story on McGovern's activities, and the mayor immediately canceled the contract. McGovern quickly packed up and left, leaving several grave sites partially exposed. But rather than having another undertaker come in and finish the job, the city just came in and graded and leveled the land for the park. Most of the open holes where bodies used to be were filled in with dirt. Others had shrubs planted in them. The park was finally completed in 1907 with several old grave sites remaining underneath. I'm shocked that there's not like some crazy paranormal stories coming out of Congress Park. Oh, it's so haunted because of all of the disturbed souls still underneath from where E.P. McGovern. I don't know why I got like super old timey plantation person. Anyway, so that he's a dick. Moving on. Our next story of David Sconce, who wanted to be just like his dad and play football. When he finally got the chance to play for his dad at Azusa Pacific College in 1974, Sconce thought things were going great. But then when the team couldn't actually win a game because I guess his dad was a bad coach, Sconce got bored and just dropped out of school altogether. He spent the next few years bouncing from job to job in search of his next big passion. And he tried to join the police academy, but he got rejected because he was colorblind. And police, they got to see color. All right, they got to see a certain color a lot and shoot it. You get it. Anyway, so stupid. Sconce's parents then encouraged him to go back to school to become an embalmer so that he could take over his mother's family's funeral home in Pasadena. Instead, Sconce, he's not super into that idea. So he used a few strategic contacts and the family's 2 crematory furnaces to just start his own company, Coastal Cremations Incorporated, in 1982. This is all in California, by the way. To get his new company off the ground, Sconce decided to just undercut all of his competitors by a preposterous amount, which is kind of a smart business. Like, you don't just start a new business that has a ton of competition, which, I mean, like, in the funeral world, there's not a ton of competition, but there's still competition. But you don't, as a business rule, you don't just come in and be like, yeah, I'm the best and I'm going to charge the most. No one's going to come to you because no one trusts you. But you know what people do trust? Real good value. All right. And people, listen, when loved ones die, I got to imagine, I haven't been in this situation yet, but I got to imagine, like, yes, they're sad that they've lost a loved one, but they're also ready to get that inheritance money. And now you're going to tell me that we got a hot new cremation upstart in the community who's half the price or like maybe even a quarter of the price of some of these other guys? Yeah, I'm going to save me some money. Bake grandma well done. All right, let's get this done. All right, come on. I got some checks to cash. And Sconce is on board with it. He offered a full cremation for $55, which I don't know how much a cremation runs. Never had to buy one. But I got to imagine it's way more than $55. I got to imagine in these days and times, it's several hundred, if not four figures. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. But $55, all right? And that was way lower than any other, not just in California. It was way lower than any crematorium on the entire West Coast, if not the entire country. By 1985, Coastal Cremations was baking more than 8,000 corpses every year between their two furnaces. The problem, though, was that California had standards. And California might as well be their own country because they have rules and laws and standards that are so different from every other state. Like go look at a label on just about anything that you purchase, and there's a specific California warning or a specific California sticker on that because California made them do it in order to sell their product in their state. And so now we got to deal with it's dumb. So the standards for California, though, dictated that only one body could be cremated at a time and that it should be left to cool before the ashes could be collected and the oven thoroughly cleaned before the next body went in. Sconce could not have cared less about this, and he had his employees cremate up to 18 bodies at a time. Ashes were then mixed together and dumped into barrels. If the families ever came and asked for their loved one's ashes, Sconce would instruct his employees to scoop up about 5 pounds for a female and up to 7 pounds for a male out of their barrel of ashes. Because look, and here's the thing. Who's going to know? No one's going to notice. All right. You're just going to go to the bag and be like, oh yeah, we'll be right back. We've got him in a nice, tasteful urn. Got old Pop in a nice, tasteful urn for you. Old Peepaw back there. Go be right back. And then just scooping out human dust into a bag and then putting it in an urn. Here you go. Here's old Peepaw. You know? And instead, it's probably not even Peepaw at all. It's just the random assortment of dozens of other different dead people. But the victims, the people picking up the ashes, they would have known. Because it's not like they're going to look inside the urn and be like, oh, yep, there's Pop. Hey, why are these ashes black? That's funny. That one's for me. Anyway, even more, because Sconce wasn't done here. Sconce would pull gold fillings out of corpses and sell them to a jeweler, which netted him as much as $6,000 more each month. He also opened up Coastal International Eye and Tissue Bank, where Sconce and his own mother would trick next of kin into signing the proper paperwork in order to donate tissue from the bodies they were going to cremate. If the families refused, Sconce didn't care. He would forge the signatures anyway and get the tissue to then donate it. And on top of that, whenever their other black market side hustle needed a different kind of organ other than skin and tissue, Sconce and his employees would use crowbars, pliers, and other tools to extract brains, hearts, lungs, and other organs that they could turn around and sell for close to $100 each, which I would have thought that amount would have been higher, right? A black market brain for $100? Like, sign me up, dude. Like, I'll go buy that right now just out of morbid curiosity. Like, probably with inflation, it's probably like, $800 now, but that's out of my price range. But still, $100 in the 1980s is, relatively cheap for a brain. Yeah. On November 23rd, 1986, Coastal Crematory then caught fire, ironically, after employees tried to break their own record by burning 19 bodies in a single furnace. Which is so stupid, but it is. And so, but like, how does that even happen? Well, I would imagine, a fat body, and all the fat from the body is basically, melts, and then that fire spread almost turns into a grease fire, and then just the whole thing goes up in flames. Well, Sconce quickly set up a new crematorium 70 miles away in the town of Hesperia at an abandoned ceramics factory to keep business going, since they basically had a backlog of corpses that needed burning, right? So not only are they stuffing nearly 20 bodies in a furnace, they almost had to, because so many people are coming to them instead of the other crematories because he's offering it for so cheap. In order to continue skirting California's cremation regulations, Sconce instead licensed the business as a ceramic factory and told authorities they were using kilns to make heat-resistant tiles for space shuttles. And for some reason, no one thought to look into that, because California, for all of their rules, has no oversight. No kind of like checking in to make sure you're doing it. We're just going to make a bunch of rules and hope people follow them. A month later into this new operation, a neighbor living near the new crematory filed an air quality complaint against the factory and adamantly suggested that they were burning dead bodies in there. Authorities came out to investigate. They interviewed this guy. They informed him that, hey, man, it's just a ceramics factory. Like, you're wrong. And this guy goes, and this is a direct quote, "Don't tell me they're not burning bodies. I was at the ovens in Auschwitz. I know what a burning body smells like." And so California, like, okay, we got to probably take this a little bit more seriously now. So Hesperia Assistant Fire Chief Will Wentworth went to the factory to investigate and found the entire place covered in soot with trash cans overflowing with ash. When he opened one of the kilns, a burning human foot fell out. Even though it was really obvious now what was going on, the California government has been made with all of our serial killers we've talked about in the past, was wholly inept and incapable of dealing with this problem. For one, the state only employed 2 crematory inspectors, both of which were always intimidated and told to come back another day whenever they showed up to the factory to inspect it. Even more, Sconce employed former football players to act as muscle and intimidate area funeral home directors into doing business with them, or to beat up anyone who dared to call them out on all of the illegal things they were doing. On one occasion, Sconce sent 2 men over to the editor of an industry newsletter because he had started asking a few too many questions. The men assaulted this editor by pouring jalapeno sauce and ammonia into his eyes. Another man who owned a rival crematorium, Timothy Waters, was found dead in February 1985 after being forcibly given digoxin, which is a heart medication, even though he didn't have a prior heart condition. Things finally caught up to Sconce in 1989 when his parents were both convicted on 10 counts of, quote, unlawfully authorizing the removal of eyes, hearts, lungs, and brains from bodies prior to cremation. They were also sued for more than $15 million from the families of the bodies they had cremated. As part of the plea deal to only spend a little more than 3 years in prison, Jerry and Lorianne Sconce completely threw David under the bus. Sconce eventually pleaded guilty to 21 charges pertaining to cremating people the wrong way. He was only sentenced to 5 years in prison for the cremation. He only served 2 years of that. He also was given lifetime probation for soliciting a hitman to take out another rival, which didn't make any sense to anyone. Like, you're going to hire a hitman and only get probation for that? Way to go, California. However, Sconce was rearrested in 2006 for selling forged bus tickets, moving to Montana without permission, which was a violation of his parole, and stealing a neighbor's rifle, which kind of gave him his 3 strikes, and he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Our next story here happened in 2002 when a driver delivering propane to the Tri-State Crematory in Noble, Georgia, noticed that there were a lot of dead bodies just kind of hanging out around the property. This is odd, obviously, because if you don't know anything about crematories from the first story, you're not actually supposed to see all of the bodies just lying around like yard decorations. When the Environmental Protection Agency went out to investigate, officers found a skull and human bone fragments, but didn't really bother to question Ray Brent Marsh, who was the owner of the crematory. On February 15th, 2002, investigators returned and found piles of rotting corpses in a storage shed and in various vaults around the property. The EPA called a portable morgue in from Maryland because apparently the one in all of the other adjacent states was too busy burning more dead bodies. The team then set to work on trying to identify the corpses, which proved difficult considering a lot of them were in advanced stages of decomposition, i.e., there's mostly just a lot of bones. Meanwhile, Marsh was arrested on over 300 various violations, which increased to 787 charges by the time the state finished their investigations. Charges ranged from theft by deception and abusing a corpse to burial fraud, giving false statements. If convicted of everything, Marsh faced multiple thousands of years in prison, which obviously he wouldn't have done because you don't sentence someone to that. It was determined after the investigation was completed that since 1996, over 2,000 people had been sent to this crematory. In all, 339 different bodies went uncremated, and 226 of those 339 were able to be identified. Within weeks, 1,700 families had banded together to sue the crematory and the funeral homes that had sent the bodies there in the first place. Instead of owning up to it and being like, hey guys, I'm sorry, it's a big mistake on my part. I will do whatever I need to do to make this right. I will accept my punishment. I am truly sorry. No, instead, he hired McCracken Poston, the kind of lawyer whose sole purpose in life is to screw over society by helping the worst people get out of trouble as long as it has like a weird name attached to it. Poston's career included murder charges against Alvin the Zenith Man Ridley, who was accused of murdering his epileptic wife who hadn't been seen in public in over 3 decades. Poston also reprimanded Byron Low-Tax Looper, who we covered back on episode 76 from the Pathetic Politics episode. If you don't remember Looper's story, he was a Tennessee politician who murdered his opponent so that he could win the election by default. He didn't. Literally everyone in his Tennessee district wrote in the widow of the guy he murdered, and she won, and then ended up having like a pretty successful political career. But this lawyer represented that guy and tried to get him off. After all the crematory stuff was done, Poston then went on to represent several defendants who were victims of Operation Meth Merchant, which was a task force that targeted South Asian-owned convenience stores in Northwest Georgia by painting the store owners as meth dealers. So, this dude sucks, all right? When Poston was representing Marsh in the crematory, he argued that a dead body couldn't be the subject of a fiduciary relationship and that dead people couldn't have a monetary value placed on them to represent a misdemeanor or a felony. As it likely did with you just now, Poston's arguments baffled the courts. Like, none of that makes sense, all right? But it worked, and Marsh accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to only 12 years in prison. Out of over almost 800 charges, 12 years in prison. In 2007, physiological testing revealed that Marsh and his father had been exposed to toxic levels of mercury due to a lot of old dental fillings in cadavers' mouths. Because the crematory had a bad ventilation system, it was argued that Marsh's mental acuity had been affected by the increased levels of mercury. I don't know if it really helped or not, but he was released from prison in 2016. Our final story here is of Anatoly Moskvin, who was born on September 1st, 1966. One of Anatoly's favorite pastimes was wandering through local cemeteries because he was born in Russia, and what else are you supposed to do there? One day, Anatoly came upon the funeral service for an 11-year-old girl, and during that service, one of the family members grabbed Anatoly and jammed his face inside the coffin, forcing him to kiss the girl on the forehead, which is wild. I don't know if that's true. That's based on what he said, but like, that's a weird grieving process. Like, you're just going to grab this random stranger you've never seen. Here, kiss girl on forehead, kiss dead girl on the forehead. Creepy, man. I mourn for loss of child. Kiss dead girl, for I cannot. It's too much. You random crazy man. Kiss dead girl on the forehead. Weird. Just what is going on in Russia? After that, though, Anatoly developed an obsession with dead people. He went on to graduate from the Nizhny Novgorod Linguistic University, where he majored in astrophysicists like all stereotypical Russians do. Just kidding. He actually majored in Celtic history for some weird reason. Like, and again, like this is me just being an ignorant American, right? Like it doesn't faze me one bit when I see like someone on like the History Channel or whatever talking about like, oh yeah, they got their degree in Celtic history or their degree in a very, niche area of history that isn't American. That doesn't faze me one bit. But then I hear some Russian guy doing it. I guess because it's Russia, I didn't expect a Russian university to offer a degree in another culture's history. Like I thought they would just be all about Russia. But no, this weirdo got a degree in Celtic history from college. But instead of going out on his own, I guess to maybe teach Celtic history, because I don't know what else you're going to do with that, Anatoly chose to remain home with his parents. He then amassed a personal library of over 60,000 books and then began collecting dolls. Unlike every other Russian ever, Anatoly refused to drink or smoke, and that's also weird by Russian standards. By 2005, Anatoly had developed a reputation as an expert on the local cemeteries in the region. And because Russians lack just any other kind of productive activity, Anatoly was commissioned to summarize and list the names of all the people inside over 700 cemeteries in the Nizhny Novgorod province, region, whatever they call it there. For the next 2 years, Anatoly walked as much as 18 miles every day visiting cemeteries. He drank from puddles because he just didn't bring food and water for himself. He spent nights in abandoned farms because he lacked the foresight to prepare for literally anything. On one occasion, he actually slept in a coffin that was being prepared for a funeral the next day. On November 2nd, 2011, Anatoly was arrested by Russian police after they had investigated reports of desecrated graves in cemeteries around Nizhny Novgorod. Investigators from the Center for Combating Extremism came in and found 26 bodies in Anatoly's garage, seated on shelves and sofas in a weird sort of life-size dollhouse scenario. Because remember when I said he started collecting dolls? Foreshadowing. Several metal nameplates from headstones, along with instructions on how to make your own doll, and several photographs and videos of open graves were also found throughout the house. When police questioned Anatoly about this, he explained that he had researched mummification theories and wanted to test them out. And during his time documenting the region's cemeteries, Anatoly would then just exhume random bodies, dry them in a mixture of salt and baking soda, and then store them in a dry place near the cemetery. Once the bodies had then dried out, he carried them home to turn them into dolls. But Anatoly, he kind of had a problem other than being a real creep. As the bodies dried, they withered and shrank. And so to combat this, Anatoly wrapped the bodies in cloth and stuffed them with other materials. This is very similar to Carl Tanzler, who we covered in episode 40, who basically fell in love with this little Hispanic girl. She died, and then he just stole her corpse and like stuffed her body full of like paper mache and stuff, dressed her up, and like slept with her for years. Anyway, just, oh God, weird. Anatoly then decorated wax masks with nail polish and dressed his dolls, dead corpses, in children's clothes. And then because they looked like regular toy dolls, Anatoly's parents never suspected anything. I guess he always also had like candles and air fresheners burning, because I got to imagine that stunk. It would have had to have stunk. It's a dead body. It's a rotting corpse. But I don't know, maybe also Russia just smells bad all the time, and maybe just the stench of death is always present in the air. I don't know. But his parents, completely oblivious somehow to all of this. Anatoly later claimed to feel sympathy for dead children and believed that they could be brought back to life through science or black magic, which outside of fervent prayer is the only alternative when science doesn't work. Anatoly made the corpses into dolls as a way to make them somewhat functional, as he researched ways to bring them back to life, which, had he actually been successful, would have been insanely horrifying, right? Like, just imagine these little Russian doll zombies. Like, he brings all these little children back to life, but they're not really alive. Like, they're just little zombies dressed like dolls. Anyway, this would have been a great episode to do in October. I'm very disappointed that I didn't do it. Like, it just, like, not not on the spooky themed brand, but just talking about death. This would have been great. Anyway, even though he knew that he was committing a crime by desecrating the graves, Anatoly claimed that the voices of the dead children were calling out to him because he's crazy. He then treated the dolls like his own children by singing songs to them, watching cartoons with them, and having birthday parties for each of them. Oh, not surprisingly, after he was arrested for all of this, Anatoly was deemed unfit to stand trial. He was sent to a psychiatric clinic where Russian authorities sentenced him to treatment until he was declared fit. And as of 2019, which is the most recent update to this story, he has still not been deemed mentally stable enough to and I get it. Like, someone who exhumed at least 26 bodies, I think. 26 girls between the ages of 3 and 29. He exhumed, dressed them up like dolls, and tried to bring them back to life. You're going to tell me he's mentally unfit? Yeah, I would agree with that.
All done.
There we go. Disrespecting the dead in the books. That's a fun little episode. So let's quickly recap and see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number 1, David Sconce cremated as many as 18 people at once in a single oven, I guess, and then just mixed all the ashes in a barrel and just gave them out to people at random if they ever asked for them, which is not what you're supposed to do. He's also charging $55 for a cremation, which seems like a great deal if you don't care about actually getting your loved one back. Anyway, number 2, David Brent Marsh, owner of the Tri-State Crematory in Georgia, faced almost 800 charges for just like getting bodies and then not doing anything with them, and only ended up serving like 12 years because his lawyer was a douchebag, but very effective. Clearly good at his job in some ways, but just kind of the worst kind of lawyer. And then number 3, Anatoly Moskvin exhumed over 24 girls and women from cemeteries to try to bring them back to life, all because allegedly some random person stuffed his face in a coffin and made him kiss the corpse that was inside.
What did we learn?
Next week on Our Weird World, it's the start of a new month. We are into February, so it is another Weird Fun Bag. It's number 15 in the series, and we're looking at the stories of Gil Perez, Victoriano Alvarez, and Emily Sagey. It's going to be a little creepy, a little semi-paranormal fun bag next week. Talking about teleportation, a lighthouse keeper that went insane, and a doppelganger story from history. If you haven't heard of what a doppelganger is, at least the creepy kind, you go learn. So come back for that next week. Thanks so much for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird.
This is a podcast.